Well, the day has finally come. We're actually going to review the Viper V3 Pro, which everybody is talking about. Whenever I start streaming over on Twitch, everybody keeps asking me what I actually do think about this mouse. And today I'll let you know why I think that this is one of the best mice to ever release. But before we do that, I do want to mention that this thing was actually sent out to me by Razer themselves. Yes, you heard that correctly. Razer sent this out to me together with a bunch of other stuff, which I am truly thankful for. I love you, Akuma. And because they sent this mouse out to me, of course I will be shilling the ever-living shit out of it. But before we keep on glazing this thing, I do want to mention that you should definitely subscribe and hit the notification bell right next to it if you're at all interested in these types of reviews, because there is so much more to come. Starting with the unboxing experience, this one actually took me by surprise. At first, you do open these two seals over here, and when you open the box, your mouse will be presented like this. Together with the 8K polling dongle being included up here, this has to be one of the most majestic presentations I've ever seen when opening a mouse. At least that's what I have to say after having unboxed over 80 mice over my years. Inside of the box, you also do get a lot of other stuff. For example, this USB-A to USB-C cable, which is pretty stiff because it is isolated very well in order to make sure that your 8K polling genuinely is 8K polling and not some Mickey Mouse polling rate. You also do get some Razer stickers, yippee. And then these signature Razer grips, which actually are fine. You also get some paperwork, and that's about it. In terms of the weight, this one is supposed to come in at 55 grams, and that is exactly what my scale has to say as well. And in terms of the QC on this thing, it is immaculate. I cannot get this thing to creak, wobble, grind, nothing. I can stubby squeeze the shit out of this mouse and just nothing happens, and it is just rock solid. This really is the complete opposite of a batch 1 ULX. Now, in terms of the shape, this one has now been made a tiny bit more safe. Coming from the Viper V2 Pro over to the V3 Pro makes you feel like you're in heaven. The Viper V2 Pro has this hourglass type shape, which definitely made my fingers cramp when swapping from the V3 Pro over to the V2 Pro in-game. I think that the Viper V2 Pro shape is simply objectively worse. The main difference here is that the Viper V3 Pro just feels overall more safe, especially the side profile just simply does not make my fingers cramp whatsoever. The sides on the Viper V3 Pro are also very flat and definitely not as tapered as on the V2 Pro here, and it doesn't force your fingers to kind of be angled on a side like this. I think that this is a huge upgrade for the shape itself, which just makes it that much more comfortable to use. In terms of the rear hump, this has definitely been slightly adjusted. Whilst the Viper V2 Pro feels very flat and has this very subtle angle towards the rear, as you can see, the Viper V3 Pro is definitely higher and not as flat, and the rear curvature of the hump is nowhere as near as subtle. It is definitely slightly more aggressive now, which makes it much more viable to a lot of claw grip players. Gone is the feeling of holding a Model O in your hand, and I do think that especially GPX Superlight players will easily be able to transition over to this shape. In terms of the overall size of this thing, this is definitely considered a medium to almost medium/large mouse these days. Back in the days, this would definitely have been a medium-sized mouse and not a large one, but considering that most mouse releases these days are pretty small, I would definitely consider this being one of the bigger mice out there. Please keep this in mind because this is not for everyone, and you definitely need some time to actually adjust to it, but in my opinion, that is a real benefit because most of these smaller mice kind of make you uncomfortable if you play a lot of hours on them, especially when you play an aggressive claw grip where you put a lot of tension to your wrist in order to play. This shape just kind of forces you to be very comfy and relaxed because it is this size. My hands are 19x10 and I play an aggressive claw grip and I love this shape. I definitely needed to get used to the size of it, but after I got used to it, I definitely do enjoy using this mouse quite a lot. The main comparison that I'm going to do here is of course also going to be the GPX Superlight or the Superlight 2. The Superlight just feels like a round potato. It is a very safe shape that everybody can use. I do think that overall the Viper V3 Pro feels more flat compared to the GPX. Even though the overall height is actually higher on the V3 Pro now, it does feel like you have more claw grip support here in the GPX because it goes down here towards the rear a bit more abruptly compared to the slightly more mellow and gradual hump here on the Viper V3 Pro. This means that if you play a claw grip, you will have a lot more contact down towards the rear end here. The way that I play with my 19x10 hands and an aggressive claw grip normally actually forces me into a pincer claw grip on this mouse, which has helped me a lot in terms of tracking and overall stability. When I use the GPX, because because it has that more abrupt and more narrow hump. The only contact point that I have on the GPX is down here on my claw grip. However, because the hump on the Viper V3 Pro is wider and has more support, I have contact all the way over here, which forms my normal aggressive claw grip into a pincer claw grip because of this contact area here. I like this very much, and I just find this insanely comfortable to use. I just think that this shape is objectively better than the GPX in many types of ways, but then again, if you are already used to the GPX shape and you'll love this shape, just stick to the mouse, because shape is king. I do think that you are absolutely able to adapt from the GPX over to the Viper V3 Pro, but spending 180 euros just to try out a different shape is not it. Overall, as I've already said, I find this a ginormous improvement over the Viper V2 Pro. And the only thing I would change about this shape would probably be the button height. Because compared to other enthusiast grade mice that are really optimized for aiming that have a very low button height in order to make you feel like you're almost aiming with your index finger because you're that close to the mouse pad, here in the Viper V3 Pro, you're still very far from the mouse pad, being all the way up here with your clicks. Whilst on something like the OP1 8K by Endgame Gear, for example, you are very close to the mouse pad down here. In terms of the coating, this white version is apparently a lot better than the black version, even though that black version is already very rubbery and grippy. So for the time being, I would definitely go for the white version, because even my friends who came to visit my place and already had the black version told me that they highly prefer this white version. The coating kind of reminds me of the Felina S450, having that not fully matte texture, but also not a glossy texture. It is like something in between where you just have a lot of grip and it just feels very soft. It is such a joy to use, and no matter how warm or cold my hands are, or even if I'm sweating like crazy, this thing grips. It's just freaking awesome. And also it doesn't grip to the point where it feels uncomfortable and not being able to micro adjust your grip. I personally would never put grips on this thing, and it is an amazing coating, especially compared to the GPX. Whilst the GPX 2 does have an improved coating and it does feel pretty decent now, this thing is just on another level, especially compared to the Viper V2 Pro that didn't even have a coating. In terms of the optical implementation here, this is actually a really good implementation. I can't say if I prefer this over the Armand opticals or the Kale Goes. All I can say that you should not have an issue using these optical switches, and you shouldn't be crying instantly because these are not blue shell pink dots. The side buttons are some of the best I have ever felt. There is virtually no pre-travel, virtually no post-travel, just a very light and spammable side button that is just a joy to use. The scroll is also not too heavy, not too light. It is perfectly down the middle while still being spammable for games like Apex. And mouse free is also one of the most spammable mouse frees I've ever tried. I also want to mention here that somebody actually made a hot swap PCB for this mouse already. So if you aren't a fan of these optical switches, you can go right ahead and buy that hot swap PCB, install it, and put in any switches that you actually enjoy using. I'll make sure to list it down in the description below. In terms of these skates, they look like 100% PTFE skates, but I'd have to assume here that they aren't. The glide is absolutely fine, and I don't really see a real reason to swap these out unless you're a schizo like me and you just live and breathe core pads. When comparing the glide side by side to something like core pads, the glide is definitely a bit slower, and that is just due to them not being 100% PTFE here. So if you want a bit faster of a glide, I would definitely go for some 100% PTFE skates here, with my favorite brand of course being Corepad. However, if you are a average gamer and not a schizo enthusiast like me, these skates will be just fine for you. I also do really like that they went for large surface skates here, because then you are definitely sure to never have any issues no matter how soft your pad is. In terms of the battery life, it really depends on what polling rate you're running. This mouse has a 300 mAh battery, which is very based. If you are running a 2K polling rate, I usually have to charge it every 3 days, maybe 4 if I'm not using it the entire day. So if you are running 8K, I can't see this lasting more than a full day of gaming. But if you're only playing in the evenings, 8K probably would be enough for 2 nights. I assume that on 1K you can easily use this thing for 1.5 to maybe even 2 weeks, but don't expect it to be the same battery life the likes of the GPX Superlight. Now in terms of the polling rate here, this is definitely as saturated as you possibly can get a wireless polling rate right now. Just please make sure that your dongle is as close to the mouse as possible and you will be able to achieve some pretty incredible polling rates here. I personally cannot really use more than 2 to maybe 4K depending on what game I play. Even on Xafine I'm having issues with 2K, but then again this has nothing to do with Razer, that is just my PC not being able to run it fully saturated. I also do want to mention that the dongle is included inside of the box, which it better be, especially at this price tag. And I sadly have to confirm that you are not able to use this hyperpolling dongle for any other Razer mouse. It is only for the Viper V3 Pro. If you're new to higher polling rates, I would recommend you to go for the highest polling rate available. Go inside of your preferred game, swipe your mouse across your pad like crazy, and watch out for any stuttering. If you have any stuttering, go down a single step, try it again, and repeat the process until you found a polling rate that works well for your specific game. There are other things that you can do out there like BIOS optimizations, strip down Windows ISOs, and try hardy shit like that, which the average gamer would never do. So what I would recommend you here is that if you are still on Windows 10, definitely go for Windows 11 because it did implement an update that does way better with higher polling rate devices. And if you already are in Windows 11, make sure you're on the latest update and haven't skipped updates for well over a year. I will also say here that your success rate on AMD is definitely lower than the success rate with Intel processors when I'm going off of the experience from our community. Now, getting into the software, you actually do need to download Razer Synapse. It kind of sucks that they don't have something like the onboard memory manager like with Logitech, but it is what it is. In here, you can change the LED of your dongle. Normally, it simply shows you the battery status, which is very basic, so that you always know if you should have to charge your mouse when you're turning off your PC. Inside of the performance tab, you can change your polling rate. I normally run 2K across all of my games because it is what my PC works best with, but yet again, if you don't know what polling rate to go with, definitely try all of them out and swipe inside of your game like crazy until you've hit a polling rate as high as possible that doesn't stutter. They also have a funny setting where you can actually compensate for the DPI deviation of other mice, and it does that by having you drag your mice side by side and track the same distance at the same time in order to see how far your DPI was away from the mouse that you were using before. This can be useful for those who are very schizo about your DPI and having their sensitivity be the same exact experience as your previous mouse, but then again, in my opinion, that is very schizo, and something like the mousepad you're using and especially the skates that you were using before will actually affect your overall sensitivity feeling just as much. Inside of the power tab, you can also change when your mouse should actually go to sleep mode. And then we get into some more juicy stuff, which is the lift off distance, because this is where I have my first and only issue with this mouse. On the low lift off distance on almost all of my mouse pads, the distance is actually so low to the point where when I place my mouse after having it lifted off my desk, sometimes it doesn't even track. You'd think the high setting would fix that then, but the high lift off distance is ludicrously high and your sensor will skip eventually just because it is that high. Now you must think, all right, then just go for the medium setting, right? Yet again, on almost all of my mouse pads on the latest firmware, sometimes when I place my mouse down, it doesn't even track just because the lift off distance is too low here again. So what Razer needs to do here is definitely adjust the medium lift off distance setting, because I have almost any mousepad on the market with me right now, and with stock skates sometimes my mouse doesn't track on this medium setting, and I am not the only one having this issue. I have talked to other reviewers in my circles as well and they have the same exact issue. For the time being, you can actually compensate for this issue with the asymmetric cutoff feature, where I have set my lift off distance to 18. I don't care about the actual functionality of the asymmetric cutoff itself, but what this actually does is that you can differentiate the liftoff distance from the landing distance itself. I just want my sensor to track correctly and also compensate for me accidentally lifting my mouse a nanometer. And this is the setting that has worked best for me, because this is what feels like a normal 2mm or 1.5mm liftoff distance for me personally. However, if you turn off your mouse, this setting is currently just being lost. Whenever I power cycle my mouse or sometimes even restart my computer, the liftoff distance setting is just gone. So what I have to do is open the whole Synapse program again, go into the setting, and then it just instantly fixes it. Razer, please fix. Now, to the conclusion. Who is this mouse for? If you simply want one of the objectively best mice on the market and you're tired of cheese graters or flexy carbon composite shells and you just want a mouse that is rock solid, the best of the best in terms of technical aspects right now, this thing is for you. I will say that this mouse is stupidly expensive, but when comparing it to the MSRP of the GPX 2, this almost looks like a steal. I do think that you need to form your own opinion about this mouse in terms of the pricing, but from an objective standpoint, ignoring the price tag here, I do think that this is most likely the best mouse that money can buy right now. Of course, shape is subjective, and I do think that most people will find a good grip on this thing. Just keep in mind that this is not a small or small medium-sized mouse. This is definitely a bit bigger than most mice out there. This I also have to tell you who this mouse is not for. Yet again, if you don't like larger or medium to large size mice, definitely don't get this thing. And if you are in an economy where you're simply not able to spend 180 euros without having to think about it twice, don't think about getting this thing. This amount of money can easily feed a whole family of 4 in certain countries for an entire month. So only because this is one of the best mice to ever release, please don't go broke just because you need that new shiny. Because there are so many other options out there that are amazing for their price class. Just like the VXE R1, which is currently available for around 25 euros. Yet again, please make sure to form your own opinion. Don't just listen to me. Watch a lot of other reviews out there by other amazing reviewers in our scene in order to gather as much information and as many perspectives as possible so that you can form your own opinion to make a purchase decision. And if you're still unsure after that, you always know there's Amazon. That's about it for this video though. Definitely make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it if you're at all interested in these types of reviews, because there are so many more of them incoming very soon. I also do want to mention that I do live streams where I unbox and test new products on the market over on twitch.tv/jakeu_fps. So definitely make sure to follow me over there if you're at all interested in these types of unboxings, especially because it's also a great place to ask me any questions that you have, and I will answer you. If you have more generic or general questions though, I would highly recommend you to go over to our Discord community called Pericord, which is pericord.com. In there we have channels for any type of peripheral enthusiast hobby. No matter if your drug of choice is gaming mice, mousepads, skates, modding, Hall effect keyboards, IEMs, we have it all covered. We are a strong community of over 1.5k members, so you are definitely sure to have your questions answered over there, and you're also able to talk about the latest and greatest leaks and releases. Other than that, that's about it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out.